Christene Marie. I am so privileged that you would join me tonight. Thank you. I want to talk about the importance of relationship tonight. Relationships are something that I found over the years we almost view as interchangeable, something that can be tossed aside, something that we get to move into, move out of it whenever we so choose. And, I was actually meeting with someone today. I tried out a new therapist and I had a good feeling about it because she was referred to me. But frankly, I haven't done a personal kind of one-to-one therapy meeting with someone new for a long time. So it definitely was a good experience. And, I was sitting there looking at this woman and I just mentioned to her, I said, I think that um, we've gotten dangerous as we just dole out everyone's a narcissist and we dole out codependence and we dole out these phrases that frankly are really damaging if you actually look at the real definition of them and if you look at the consequence of somebody living that way. And frankly, there's something about it in addition to it where it really does position us as the victims in a way that we lose power. And as we were talking, she asked me, she was like, well, what happens when you do position yourself as a victim? And that's what I reflected back. We lose all of our power when we assign someone else as this big bad wolf and we're just these innocent little victims. It's really interesting. In trying to be guileless, we then deem ourselves powerless. And so I realized over the weekend, I was hosting a retreat with just the most wonderful women. It was so, so good. And I love asking this question because I think it's so important for every single one of us to know the answer to it. When were you most healthy in your life? What was your season of life? What were you doing? How were you living? How did you feel? Who were you in relationship with? And really take an audit. There's a famous business book for most of my entrepreneurial friends. I'm sure you've read it. It's by Jim Collins, Good to Great. And what's interesting about this book is, he talks a lot about how to move from good companies to great ones. And one of the things that he reminds us is that if we stop doing the very thing that helped us get to the good status, we have to take what worked into the great status. Yes, some things need to die off and some things do need to be reborn, but why stop doing what works? Why just automatically assume, oh, it's time to get to the next level, let me stop everything that I was doing that works? And so kind of with that whole lens of where we're going with this, it's really important that as we're analyzing relationships that we're doing an audit and our lives, even like what was working in our lives in the past. Where did we do things well? When did we not? When was I actually healthy? And so much of the time, if we're not paying attention to it, we're going to repeat the things that were unhealthy for us and just forget, oh my gosh, that little habit that I did every day that felt inconsequential actually made a real impact for me. Man, I need to start waking up early again, or whatever the thing is that we realize actually made a big impact in our lives. And so this question, when was I most healthy, really is worthy of all of us to consider. And so I sat with this question a couple weeks before Christmas, and this weekend over the Knowing Retreat, I asked the ladies to consider this. And the thing that rose up for nearly every single person, the main theme when all of them were healthy, was that every single one of them was alone. They weren't in a partnership type of relationship. Some of them were even single moms, but the reality was is that they were doing life alone. And it really made me pause because I have found the same to be true for me. And as I've been sitting with this over, because I realized that probably a couple months ago, man, like why is being in a relationship so incredibly hard? Is it supposed to be this hard? And honestly, a lot of the noise, a lot of what's on media these days is that we're not seeing people talking about the good in the hardship of relationship. Because in the reality of what we're experiencing, the hardship and the trial in that moment is that we're actually coming face to face with ourselves in a way that we otherwise never would have. Yes, of course, there's going to be toxic relationships, sure. what does that even mean? I don't know. But I'm talking about the relationships that both people really love each other and they're genuinely trying to do the right thing and they're really trying to grow, and it is just freaking hard. And what I have found to be true over and over and over again is that when I am triggered by someone else, the gun was already fully loaded. There had to be pressure there already for then the trigger to be pulled. So for us to say, oh, they just trigger me, well, clearly there's something in me to be triggered. And so really, me being in a relationship with somebody is just a big old mirror. And again, I'm not talking about the relationships where we're actually with someone that, isn't, it's not wise. I'm talking about someone that is like us, that's genuinely trying to do their best, because at the end of the day, isn't that what we're trying to do? Tonight I watched this movie called Song Sung Blues. I think that's the name, and that's the title of a Neil Diamond song. And I went with my dad and my sister, and it is the most beautiful film. And I might give a spoiler alert here, but it's this beautiful love story about these two singers who are so passionate about music and performance, and boy, do they fall in love. And it's so beautiful. And they have a blended family. She has a daughter and a son, and he comes into their lives and they call him Papa and they just love him. And it's so, so lovely. And she's outside gardening one day and a car comes careening into her in their house, and she loses her leg and she gets horribly addicted to the meds that she's put on. Finally, after months and months, it's just been awful. In the home, she won't get out of bed. She's just laying on the couch, so addicted to her pills. Finally, he checks her into a rehab. And then when she comes out, she really is a changed woman, but she's already done so much damage with the relationship with her kids and with her husband. And while I was sitting there watching this, and I thought, most couples today, in the way most people are engaging in relationships, would have left by now. They would have left. This is too hard. It's too painful. I'm too triggered. And it really made me pause. When we think about, why do we get in relationships in the first place? Are we doing it to make us feel good? Are we doing it to get that happily ever after? Because that's what Hollywood has sold us. We're sold this narrative. The movie stops after they get married. The movie doesn't go on after the marriage begins. And so there's little context and there's little window into the reality of what relationship is. And again, coming to the why are we doing this in the first place? And the why matters so critically, because if my why in life is to maybe have peace, then maybe relationship isn't for me, because surely I will actually not engage with peace if I'm in confronting my mirror. If I'm being forced to hold up a mirror for me, whereas no other person, no other time, no other area or environment in my life would hold up a mirror, and I want to experience peace, but I've got a whole lot of baggage that I've never dealt with. And when I look up and I hold up a mirror, I can see all that baggage behind me. That's what a mirror does. It reflects the reality of what we're carrying versus solely looking ahead and looking out. Now we're faced to look inward and look at ourselves and see what we're carrying along with us. And so if we don't want to look in the mirror, then we shouldn't be in a relationship. That's continuously what I'm seeing, what I'm experiencing with all the couples I'm talking to, with my own self and my own life experience. Man, if we're not willing to look in the mirror, I don't think that we can be in a relationship where there's transparency and honesty, because every single one of us is coming into relationship with a past. Even the lesson, I started reading A Course in Miracles every morning on the Knowing Show. Last night I did it in the evening, but for the most part, every single morning. And this morning's lesson was, all I see is the past, or I only see the past. And isn't that so true? And so when we do look in the mirror, we actually see how much of the past is showing up here in the present moment. So I just want to take a moment and say hello on the channels. Y'all, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I'm sorry I haven't been checking on I haven't been checking the chat. I'm sorry, I've been so neglectful. Joshua Brown, thank you so much for jumping on here. Mark Travis. I love you said I'm most healthy back in 1984, but I'm 60 and married, and my wife's a great cook. I love that. It is funny. It's funny to look and see, because when we think about what makes us most healthy, there's different categories. There's physically healthy, spiritually healthy, emotionally healthy, intellectually healthy. You know, when were we in our prime really learning and garnering new information, feeding our minds? So I love that. I'm married and my wife's a great cook. I'm so happy. Um, Trump King, good to see you. Mark Travis, you said, but this year I went from 290 to 270 and I had a 49 to 44 inch waist. Congratulations. That is so inspiring. Thank you so much for sharing that. I love that you're 60. I got to tell you, I am seeing more and more people 50s, 60s, 70s making the last like two-thirds and third like well, I guess yeah, two-thirds of their life look really vibrant. We put so much weight and stock on our 20s and 30s. We're just getting started. So thank you for your example. I love that you said that, Mark. Casey, no, I was not an extra. But I think I know why you're saying that. That's funny. Mood Sarah, good to see you. Thank you so much for joining. Good morning to you. It is evening for me. Joshua Brown, thank you so much for jumping on here. Hard to please. You know, I actually don't remember the name of it. Chris, women are into quick gratification. That's an interesting note. I think all of us are, to be honest with you. I think that our swiping habits really reveal that. It is so easy for me to just go and pick up my phone the second I have a moment of free time. Even today, I was sitting at a stoplight and I went to reach for my phone and I was like, okay, nope, just be, like just be here in this moment. And I really, when we think about the aspect of relationships and how us looking in the mirror, there's something about being in the present moment. If we're unwilling to look in the mirror and look at ourselves, then we most likely can't really actually be present with ourselves and not be in distraction. Because if we can't bear ourselves, then there's no way that we can be with ourselves. And I think that's just a really good audit. That's a great question for us. Like, am I actually able to sit alone with myself? And if I'm not, then that's probably a good indicator that either I have misplaced worth, where my worth is assigned to what I do or what people think about me, or I'm trying to hide from something internally. And the more I allow myself to face the external or be filled with external noise, then I don't have to face the internal noise. So I think that that's a really good note there, that I think we're all into quick gratification. Tihaz, please feel free to ask a question. And Rob Young, thank you so much for jumping on here. Life alone, it's working and it has been 6 months. I'd be curious, and I'm going down the chat here, so maybe you already answered this, but I'm curious, when we talk about what's healthy, what does healthy mean to you? Because all of us have such different definitions. So I would be curious if you guys can put here in the chat, what does healthy actually mean to you? Andrew, please feel free to drop that in. The Discus, thank you for joining. Matthew, I am 32 years old. Robbie, thank you so much for jumping on here. I'm just coming on down here through the chat. Tracy, good to see you for joining. Rob Green, I have done commercials. I'm not a famous actress, not whatsoever. I was talking to my dad tonight. I was like, maybe I'll give Hollywood a try. I was in a Hallmark type Christmas movie, and that's the only one I've been in, but it was so much fun. And honestly, it was like my childhood dream come true. It was so much fun. All right, y'all, thank you so much for coming on here. Okay, I think I've gotten through most of the chats. Okay, I think I'm through. All right, so just jumping back into here, why do we even need relationships? So one, they obviously hold up a mirror for us. Man, do they help us grow. I really have found and experienced so much growth over the last year of just being I've been more engaged with my family than I have probably ever, to be perfectly honest. When I was married, my former husband and I just weren't super engaged with my family. And after, once he left and I just was healing, I actually wasn't super engaged with them then either, just because frankly, as I was trying to come to know myself, as I was trying to eliminate the external noise and kind of go inward for the first time, their voices were so loud in my head and so important to me that it was so easy for me to, because I had developed a very codependent nature where I really truly talk about misplaced worth. My worth was 100% based in what other people said, navigating my life according to what other people wanted. Even today, my therapist was like, I heard you say you should. And I was like, yeah, I still have that in me where it's, okay, how should I be? How should I act? What should I think? Rather than, okay, well, what's the reality of how I do feel in this moment? That doesn't mean that I'm going to give into it and allow my emotions to control me. But what it does mean is that I need to acknowledge it. Because if I don't acknowledge it, then subconsciously I'm suppressing them and they will come out later and probably have more power over me than if I just were to deal with them here in this moment. So it is so important that we actually take the time to address and identify, how am I feeling? And that does not mean that they are the ones in the driver's seat of our life. But if we don't allow for us to recognize them, then our anger and bitterness, resentment, unforgiveness towards someone else, it's so wild because when we think about it, the emotion that we feel towards them that's so strong, well, isn't it ultimately like we're allowing somebody else by way of our extreme emotions that are so big, so strong about them? They're the ones in I actually had this thought last year. I was thinking about forgiveness, and I just had this picture of like there's this mountain that all of us have. We all have this mountain in our lives. And when we have not forgiven somebody, we're effectively putting them on the mountain and we're standing there looking up at them and just being like, man, I'm so screwed. You did all this stuff. I'm here because of you up there. You've put me here. I'm so angry. But then when we actually choose to forgive, we we literally, yes, release them, but forgiveness is for us. We reclaim, forgiveness is a reclamation. We reclaim our position at the pinnacle of that mountain. We're in the driver's seat now. We're actually the ones driving and we're in control now. And we're no longer so, there's such a vulnerability to other people for so long as we're not actually maintaining a state of being and connectedness with ourselves, because otherwise they're going to have way more power over us than is wise or healthy. And I was thinking about this a lot yesterday because frankly I was in a hard relational conversation and in a hard relational conflict, and I felt more and more like I didn't have control over my emotions. But it was because I was suppressing them. I wasn't allowing them to come out. And one of the ways that I've allowed it to come out is literally through writing. That's one of the best ways for me to, even just by talking into my phone, there's something about letting something pour out of you, pour forth, because otherwise if it doesn't come out, it's going to stay in. There's even in honestly biblical narrative, there's a woman who desperately wants a son, and it is only after she goes and it says she pours out her soul before the Lord. That is like the most beautiful, beautiful, vulnerable thing. But she's doing it one before a source that's trustworthy. She's taking it to God. She's not just spilling her beans to everybody. And then she's actually able to empty out her soul in a way that now she's actually free to receive something new. Because for so long as we're holding on tightly to whatever the emotion is and we're not releasing it, we can't actually exchange it for anything else. So if we're wondering how to effectively change and get free from someone, get free from a past moment, pouring it out and releasing it and expressing it. Honestly, I experienced this strongly when my brother-in-law was killed. I did not want to grieve. I didn't want to go back and remember the day. I didn't want to really grieve because I didn't want to let go. It felt so unfair, the whole thing, that he was killed by a drunk driver, that like his life was taken, that my 3-week-old baby niece would grow up without a daddy. All of it was just so maddening. And I didn't want to let go. Like for 6.5 years, I just carried him with me and just felt this deep sorrow for 6.5 years. And no one knew, but I know that I wasn't engaging with life because I was allowing the grief to just stay so close. And it actually felt really honorable. And so I had to come to terms with, am I actually able to be who I was created and intended to be while I carry this grief? Am I truly honoring him? Because knowing Nate is his name, knowing him, he would have 100% wanted me to live the most full and brilliant and beautiful life. But it felt like this badge of honor. And frankly, there's a book by Bessel van der Kolk. He was the psychologist who actually coined the term post-traumatic stress disorder. And he was working with a lot of war vets. And there was an honor badge that they carried around. I cannot have a happy life because my brother in arms, my comrade, was killed. I cannot move forward. And so grief tethers us to the past, and it's an honor badge, which is really devastating because that's not at all what they would have wanted, nor us even being able to reach the fulfillment and potential on how can their death be alchemized for somehow, some way good coming from this. That is redemption. And that is the hallmark of what makes for hope, that somehow the devastation, the grief can be used for good. But if we're unwilling to release it and let go, our body literally is storing the trauma. And so for me to even move through the grieving process, I actually had to go back to the day when I heard the news about my brother-in-law being killed. And so I was sitting there on I think it was Valentine's Day, 2022 or 21. And I was watching this film about, I think it was actually about a singer-songwriter who he and his wife got married, and within 3 months she died of leukemia. And I just got chills now thinking about it. There's this scene where her casket is lowered into the ground, and it just took me back to the graveside of my brother-in-law getting buried and my sister just weeping. And then kind of taking myself back to that graveside moment, I went back even further to, when I heard the news and my sister called me, and I just remembered that I did not call my other sister, my older sister. I didn't call her when I found out that her husband had been killed. And I had been carrying so much shame over that all those years. So it wasn't just that my body was storing the grief, it was storing the shame over my reaction to the grief. And I had no idea. And I remember hearing the news and thinking, I had a couple thoughts, literally, in high stress, you're like, okay, what can I do? And I thought, like, what can I do? I'll pray. And then I just realized, like, I can't even pray. And that's, I think, when it just hits you, you're like, it's final. Like, there's nothing you can do. And part of the reason why I was so against remembering was the shame over my response to it. So what our bodies are suppressing and storing, and the trauma there, like, that's what it means when your body keeps the score. The body remembers. It remembers what you did. It remembers what you didn't do. It remembers what people did to you. And so being in relationship, it reveals that, being in relationship. My eldest sister, funny enough, she's the one who lost her husband. She recommended I watch that movie. So it was because of relationship that I watched that film, and I was able to go back and heal from that wound. And so even just as I'm saying this, I'm like going to challenge my own self. Jordan Peterson is a Canadian psychologist, and he says, effectively, the goal is that you're able to contend with yourself in your own mind and battle out ideas. So I'm going to battle out an idea that I just stated. So why do we need relationships? They reveal to us where we need to heal, but also relationships often cause so much trauma. So isn't it best to just hide under a rock and not engage at all? Because then you'll surely not get hurt. In the story of creation, the first man that was ever created, he is in the garden, in this perfect, the setting is that there's this beautiful, perfect garden, and there's animals and the creator walks with Adam. It says Adam walked with God. And yet he's alone physically. Like, he doesn't have, or I guess in terms of human to human, there's no other human with him. And yet he's in paradise. There's no problems. There's nothing wrong. So he's not triggered, right? There's no problems. There's no person to come along and have a problem with him. And yet God said, even in the perfection of him walking with God, God said it's not good for man to be alone. even though he was never triggered, he never had any fights, even though there was no one to give him a talk back or give him any sass. God still deemed it was good for him not to be alone. And what's interesting is that he technically wasn't. He had God with him. So why is it that God deemed man physically in this physical world being alone, as even though he was there? So that's interesting. And it just makes me think, I think relationships are so much more precious than we realize. And we're not handling them with a sacrility around what they can and should be. Watching this movie tonight, Song Sung Blues by Neil Diamond, it was with Hugh Jackman and Kate Hudson. Man, she really needed him, and she was so awful to him. She was addicted to meds at that point. And that's where the power of relationships comes in. Do we actually have it within ourselves to truly love the other person even when they can give nothing back? And there's 7 different types of love. When I went to Croatia for a week this last spring just to really focus on healing from certain things with my former marriage. And I realized, I was thinking, I was like, man, I say I love my husband, but was that really love? And so I leaned into the Greek word of love. And there's 7 different types of love. There's the committed kind, there's the brotherly love, there's actually self-love, there's the kind of sexy, hot steam, flirty love. There's the almost like the longevity love. There's the fun love. It's just like super, super fun. And the one that really was meaningful to me is that we've got to have all 7 types of love incorporated in our relationships. We need to have self-love. Man, do I need to make sure that I'm taking care of myself and really tending to me so that I'm giving from a place of overflow and excess rather than constantly running dry, and then people encountering me, I'm on empty, and they're like, "Man, why is mom or dad, man, I got to walk on eggshells?" Well, because we're not taking care of ourselves. So of course everyone has to walk on eggshells around us. So we have to have self-love, but then we also have to have, man, when that sexy flirty love runs out, or when we're not feeling super fun, or somebody is pregnant and has morning sickness every day, that's where the committed love comes in. It's like, I got you. And isn't that the most beautiful, powerful thing in the world, to have that kind of love? And frankly, there's also the agape love, which is the love from God towards us that's just never ending. It's not conditional, it's always going to be there. And I think that that's actually the kind of love that you can have towards someone, even if you're no longer married to them. Like I think I'll always love my husband, former husband. And I think that's right and good. When you've really given so much of yourself to someone, you've invested so much. I think that that's actually so appropriate. And when we, man, I actually think I'm going to return to the comments now because I don't want to speak too much. So I'm going to take a break for a moment. Um, I just saw a comment. I'm 14 years together with my girlfriend without lies on both sides. It's called love, and love creates both sides. It's called love, and love's created by God. Jesus and Maria also were honest and close together for a long time. I love that. Um, that's so good. William, I work for Century Fox Studios for years, and I'm retired. I'm 58 years old. Thank you so much for joining tonight. Oh, you said you were in a lot of extras and movies. How cool. Ah, we need to talk. um, they keep the world spinning. Oh, I love this. You think all things in life are created by nothing. 100% there is something life, and it is detailed. And if you live an honest life together with somebody, oh, I love that. Derek Jones, I don't know if you're still here, but I'm so glad to see you. You said, I'm new here. The algorithm decided that I needed to see you. I'll hang out for a bit. I'm so glad. Blah, 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 blah. Thank you so much for joining. Oh no, I just saw I hit my parked car in 2025 and drove off. I'm so sorry. Health for me is physical, mental, and emotional. I completely agree. Oh my gosh, and it really is health in all those categories. So I love that. Rusty, thank you so much for joining. G Soldier, thank you. Alfonso, you need relationships for survival. I completely agree. And honestly, you see that in like the mother and child dynamic. It was so interesting. There was a study done where a mother was like holding her child, and she was feeding it. So obviously they're getting sustenance, and she's smiling at the baby, cooing at it. And then the study was that she would stop. And the baby saw the change in the mother's countenance, and then they immediately reacted and they started getting fussy and agitated and they stopped eating. And then the mother started cooing again and smiling, and then the baby giggled and started laughing and eating again. There is safety emotionally and safety physically. And man, if we've got the emotional ripped away from us, physically, our bodies feel the lack of emotional safety. There was, oh, this is so sad. A woman and her husband were going to adopt a baby. I don't remember what country they were going to, but they walked into the adoption facility and there were all these babies lying in cribs, and it was silent. And she was like, why are these babies not making a noise? Like, under 3 months old. What is going on? She was just like, well, they're cried out. No one came. And that is devastating. Like, we need connection literally for survival. Alfonso, you said marriage is overrated. I really, I'm going to have to prove this out. So give me 30 to 40 years. But I think that there's another way. I think that there's a better way. I feel so strongly about this. So don't mind me while I get passionate for a minute. We are taught IQ from the age of 4 years old, taught how to read, how to know the alphabet, ABCs, math, science, English, how to write. And we are not told how to do relationships. And this is what our entire life is dedicated to. This is what life is built on. And so it's just really devastating in some ways to think about how undercultivated we are emotionally. I see it in myself. I see it in my partner. I see it in my family. I see it everywhere. When we get activated and that trigger fires and we're effectively triggered, so often we're actually reducing to the age that we were as a child when we went through that pain, because we never learned how to deal with it in the first place. So that's what knowing is. Like, talk about my mission in life. Yes, I have a branding and marketing business. Yes, I have digital marketing for home service businesses. I love all of that. But man, knowing ourselves and knowing how to heal, we can heal on our own. Yes, these conversations are helpful. And yes, books are helpful. Therapy is helpful. Yes, coming to my knowing retreats, doing all this one-to-one, working together, all of that is great. And we have the ability to heal on our own. And so there's something around marriage where I really believe it can be redeemed. I still believe in it, even though mine failed, because I think I know a lot better now. And my second one might fail. I hope not. I'm not married yet, and I'm not even engaged, but I hope my second one doesn't fail. But I know that I'm so much further than where I was before. And there's so much I didn't know. I did not know how to be emotionally intelligent. There's a reason why intelligent is assigned to it. There's an intelligence in learning our body, learning our spirit, learning our soul. So I'm jumping down. Kenneth, thank you so much for joining. I'm so glad you're a new subscriber. Thank you so much for joining on here. And yes, 𝐤𝐚𝐢𝐥𝐲, I would love to hear from you. Steve, I am dating someone, but thank you so much. 𝐤𝐤𝐲, thank you so much for joining. You said, what is she talking about? And you wonder why she got divorced. I am talking about just how and why relationships are so important. I actually feel very strongly, like, I know why I got divorced. I know why I would have divorced me. And I would have divorced me because I was effectively a non-person. I was so focused on just being so loving and making him happy and trying to make his life wonderful. And I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I wanted. Man, it's so hard to be with somebody like that, who's just constantly looking outward rather than looking inward. Like, I feel so much more alive than I did then. So when you ask about that, that's probably why. But also, I mean, he said, if you ever lose God, come find me. If I find God, I'll come find you. So I think that was it. All right, just jumping back on here to the chat. Y'all, thank you so much for coming tonight. Paul River. I am reading the chat now, and I'm looking at a lot of interesting things. Daniel, thank you for joining tonight. 𝐤𝐤𝐲, thank you for coming on here. All right, y'all, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. I think that there's a lot here. Lendl Jr., I just saw your note. I'm so happy when I see your name on here. Um, I see a lot. There's a lot here to just kind of keep moving through. Paul Revere, thank you for coming on here. Um, Rohunt, Joe. Mm, I really would love, as we're talking about relationships, I really hope that as we walk away from this moment, whenever we're feeling triggered, whenever we're feeling annoyed, even right here, right now, why? How is this a mirror for you? Because I was working through that very thing earlier today. Just really allowing ourselves to be curious. Why in this moment am I activated? Because y'all, we're activated by our children, we're activated by our bosses, we're activated by our employees. We get angry, we get mad. And man, if we want to, I was actually talking with a client the other day. He's a therapist, and we were on a webinar together that I was moderating. And he said something that was so brilliant. He works with leaders, and he says, I really work with them because if they're not creating an atmosphere of psychological safety, people cannot be creative. They're not going to be open. They don't feel safe. And just like how y'all said earlier, what's healthy for you is emotionally, physically, and intellectually. We're so connected. We can't be so strong and vibrant in one area and not in another. It's going to be tipsy turvy. There is a book called Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, and this man who authored it was a pastor at a church at one point. And his wife comes up to him and she says, "You are so emotionally immature that I do not want to follow you as a leader. You might be spiritually mature, but you're not emotionally mature. And for that reason, I'm leaving your church." She didn't leave him, but she left his church. That is going to be a big wake up call. So, where in our lives are we getting triggered, feeling the sense of like, wow, that person is making a decision based on me? That must mean this is a good mirror moment. And so I just hope that all of us, as we get annoyed by the little things, those are all moments to recognize, what do I actually want? How do I want to show up? Do I want to engage with peace or in a place of peace? Do I want to be somebody that's able to just enjoy people and see the good in them and celebrate them? If we don't want to be so easily activated, I think then there's going to have to be some change. But maybe you like that. So maybe we just have to also be honest with ourselves. I'm thinking about, there's personalities where people really love the tea and they love the drama. That's okay as long as we admit the truth. So the looking in the mirror doesn't necessarily always mean that we have to change, but what it does require of us is truth and honesty. So with that, who I just saw you say she should read the chat. So once I hop off here, I'm gonna look at all the chats. But y'all, I hope you have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much for joining, and I will see you tomorrow morning on A Course in Miracles as we chat about lesson number 8.